The camera sweeps low over southeast Washington, D.C., past the gleaming Capitol dome, its white marble glowing under the evening sky, past the towering monuments that stand as symbols of power, justice, and the American promise, to crumbling, gray building hunched against the city's edge, the D.C. General Family Shelter, a derelict hospital turned makeshift refuge for the city's forgotten, its walls stained with neglect, its windows dim with despair, its halls echoing with the chaos of lives, teetering on the brink, a place where hope is a fragile flame snuffed out by the weight of poverty, where dreams are buried under the rubble of systemic failure. A child's laughter cuts through the noise, bright and fleeting, like a spark in the dark, a melody that dances through the crowded corridors, then fades into an eerie silence that lingers like a ghost, haunting the city that claims to care. She was 8 years old. Relisha Rudd, a girl with a radiant smile, neatly braided hair, and a love for princess dresses, vanished from this place in March 2014, swallowed by a system that was supposed to protect her, erased from a world that was supposed to see her, lost in a city that was supposed to keep her safe. For weeks, no one noticed, not her teachers, who marked her absent but didn't question, not the social workers, who failed to follow up, not the shelter staff, who saw her daily, not the neighbors, who heard her laughter echo through the halls, not the city, whose power and resources never reached the margins where she lived. The screen flashes to a grainy surveillance still, a small figure in braids, walking down a hotel hallway beside a man twice her size, her steps hesitant, her small hand clutching her bag, her eyes downcast, her fate sealed in a moment no one questioned until it was too late, a moment that would become a wound in a nation's conscience. That man, Kahlil Tatum, a shelter janitor with a shadowed past, was the last person seen with her. We will never stop searching for Relisha. A 2019 post from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children declared, its words a hollow promise against a decade of unanswered questions, a cry into a void that has yet to respond, a plea that echoes in a city that failed her, a nation that forgot her, a world that moved on without her. This is the haunting story of Relisha Rudd, a girl who vanished in plain sight, a child failed by every system meant to keep her safe, a name that lingers like a wound in a city that looked away, a story that forces us to confront our blind spots, to question our priorities, to face the painful truth about the children we leave behind, the children we fail to see. How did we lose her? Why did no one see her slipping away? And 11 years later, on this day, July 11th, 2025, at 9:36 p.m. Eastern European Summer Time, why are we still asking, where is Relisha Rudd? And what does her absence say about who we are as a society, as a city, as a people who let a little girl disappear in the heart of our nation's capital? The screen flashes back to a vibrant classroom at Payne Elementary School, 2013. The walls adorned with colorful posters of letters, numbers, and dreams. The air filled with the hum of young voices, the chatter of children imagining futures beyond their circumstances, their laughter a fragile defiance against the weight of their realities. A little girl with soulful eyes and neatly braided hair raises her hand, her smile wide, her voice carrying a spark that cuts through the room's chaos, her presence a burst of light in a world that often felt dark, her laughter a melody that stayed with those who knew her, a sound that promised hope even in the face of hardship, a reminder that joy could exist in the margins. Relisha Rudd, born October 29th, 2005, was a bright, happy 8-year-old, described by her cheerleading coach, Shannon Smith, as a child who lit up the room with her laughter, a girl who made you feel like you were the only one in the world when she talked to you. Per the Washington Post, 2014. She lived with her mother, Shamika Young, and 3 younger brothers, aged 5, 3 and 1, in the D.C. General Family Shelter, a dilapidated former hospital in southeast Washington, home to over 600 children and hundreds of families. Its halls plagued by bedbugs, broken heaters, moldy walls, and a pervasive sense of despair, a place where hope was a fragile thing, easily crushed by the weight of poverty, instability, and systemic neglect, a place that felt more like a trap than a sanctuary. Relisha's family struggled. Shamika, a young mother in her 20s, had a history of foster care, mental health challenges, and evictions, her life marked by trauma and systemic barriers that left her teetering on the edge, her ability to parent strained by a world that offered little support, little mercy. Per NBC4 Washington's podcast, Through the Cracks, 2024. Yet Relisha was a constant, a girl who went to school regularly, joined Girl Scouts, sold cookies door to door with her grandmother, Melissa Young, who called her my best friend, my shadow, my heart, her voice breaking as she recalled Relisha's love for lime green, her dreams of being a princess. Per WUSA 9, 2025. The camera lingers on a photo of Relisha in a lime green outfit, her grin infectious, her eyes sparkling with dreams of escaping the trap house, as she called the shelter, a term that captured the suffocating reality of her world, a place that caged her childhood, that dimmed her light, that stole her chance to dream freely. She was a child who loved to spell her name, Relisha, in a cheerful video for the Homeless Children's Playtime Project, her voice bright, her spirit unbroken despite the chaos around her, her dreams alive despite the odds stacked against her, her presence a testament to resilience, a beacon of hope in a place that offered little. But beneath her smile was a vulnerability no one fully saw, a fragility the system overlooked, a child whose light was dimmed by the shadows of neglect, whose life was shaped by forces she couldn't control, whose future was at the mercy of a world that didn't see her worth. The screen cuts to an empty school desk, her name scribbled on a faded worksheet, a backpack untouched, a pair of tiny sneakers left behind, a lime green hair tied discarded in a corner, a reminder of a girl who was there, who was visible, until she wasn't, until the world let her slip away, until the systems meant to protect her turned a blind eye, until her laughter faded into a silence that haunts us still, a silence that demands we ask why. The scene shifts to the chaotic halls of D.C. General, early 2014, the air thick with the sounds of crying babies, shouting parents, and the hum of flickering fluorescent lights, the walls scarred with peeling paint, the floors littered with the debris of lives in disarray, the atmosphere heavy with desperation and distrust. A man in a janitor's uniform moves through the crowd, his smile disarming, his hands offering gifts, tablet, a manicure, a ticket to Disney on Ice, small gestures that won trust in a place where kindness was rare, where desperation made generosity feel like salvation, where a friendly face could mask a predator's intent, where a smile could hide a darkness no one suspected. Kahlil Tatum, 51, was a familiar figure at the shelter, a maintenance worker employed by the Community Partnership for the Prevention of Homelessness, a contractor running the facility on a $13 million budget. His criminal past, convictions for burglary, larceny, and breaking and entering, with prison stints from 1993 to 2003 and 2004 to 2011, should have barred him from working near vulnerable children, but a 2012 D.C. Inspector General report revealed that employees like Tatum were grandfathered in, without proper background checks, a systemic oversight that left the shelter's residents exposed to a predator hiding in plain sight, a man whose smile concealed a history of violence, whose kindness was a lure, per the Washington Post, 2016. Tatum befriended Shamika Young, Relisha's mother, who saw him as a godfather to her daughter, a man who offered stability in a life of chaos, who brought gifts and attention to a family drowning in need, who seemed to care when no one else did, who filled a void left by a system that offered no support, per the Washington Post, 2014. "I never got a bad vibe about him," said Antonio Wheeler, Relisha's stepfather, in 2014, recalling how Tatum took Relisha on outings, to the mall, to his home in Southeast D.C., always bringing her back, his actions cloaked in kindness, his intentions hidden behind a mask of care, his presence a comfort that masked a growing danger, a deception that went unquestioned in a place where survival often trumped suspicion. The camera flashes to a shelter mother's wary glance, her voice low, her words heavy with unease. "He offered my daughter money in plain view," she told the Washington Post in 2014, noting Tatum's pattern of targeting young girls, giving them gifts, letting them stay at his house, a violation of the shelter's strict no-fraternization rules that went unnoticed by staff, a red flag ignored in a place where oversight was as broken as the walls, where the vulnerable were left to fend for themselves, where a predator could operate unchecked, his actions hidden in the chaos of a shelter that failed its residents. By February 2014, Relisha stopped attending school. Shamika told Payne Elementary that her daughter was under the care of Dr. Tatum for a neurological condition, a claim that raised no immediate alarms, despite its vagueness, despite the absence of any medical documentation, despite the improbability of a janitor being a doctor, despite the red flags that should have screamed for attention. "She's with a doctor," Shamika said, per school records cited by the Washington Post, 2015, and the school accepted it, assuming a medical professional was involved, trusting a mother's word without question, failing to probe deeper into a story that didn't add up, failing to ask the questions that could have saved a child. No one asked for a first name, a medical license, a hospital's contact information, or a doctor's note. No one called Child and Family Services, despite Relisha's history of absences. 30 days that school year, many excused by her mother's vague medical claims. A pattern that should have triggered concern but didn't. A red flag that was ignored in a system that prioritized compliance over curiosity, that trusted without verifying, that failed to act when it mattered most. The camera cuts to a social worker's cluttered desk, a phone ringing unanswered, a fax machine spitting out a report that never arrived, a file marked Rudd buried under a pile of paperwork, a system that trusted a lie without question, a system that failed to see a child slipping away, a system that assumed rather than verified, that accepted rather than acted, that let a girl's life hang in the balance. "We didn't know," a school official later said, per the Washington Post, 2015, but the truth was starker. No one checked. No one pushed. No one saw the danger lurking in a janitor's smile, in a mother's desperation, in a system's indifference, in a shelter where rules were ignored and children were left vulnerable, in a city that claimed to care but failed to see. The screen lingers on a shelter hallway, children's voices echoing, a janitor's cart rolling past, a girl's laughter fading into the distance, a life slipping through the cracks of a system too broken to notice, too distracted to care, too flawed to save her, a child whose absence would soon become a city's shame, a nation's failure. The camera zooms in on Laybone Workman, a Payne Elementary social worker, his face tense, his hands gripping the steering wheel as he drives to D.C. General on March 19, 2014, his heart heavy with a growing sense of dread, his mind racing with questions that should have been asked weeks earlier. Relisha had missed nearly 3 weeks of school, 30 days total that year, far exceeding the 10-day threshold for mandatory reporting to Child and Family Services, per D.C. regulations cited by the Washington Post, 2015. Workman had spoken to Dr. Tatum by phone, a man who claimed Relisha was under medical care for a neurological condition and promised a doctor's note, but gave a faulty fax number that led nowhere, a dead end that should have raised alarms, but didn't, a lie that should have been questioned but wasn't. "This is getting ridiculous," Principal Vielka Scott Marcus snapped, overhearing yet another excuse, her frustration mounting, her instinct screaming that something was wrong, that a child was at risk, that the system had failed to act when it mattered most, per the Washington Post, 2015. At the shelter, Workman demanded to see Dr. Tatum. His voice sharp, his urgency palpable, his heart pounding with the fear that he was too late. A case manager stared blankly, her words cutting through the air like a blade, each syllable a blow to the heart. "He's the janitor." The blood rushed to Workman's ears as the truth hit. There was no doctor. Relisha had been with Kahlil Tatum, a shelter employee with a criminal history, since at least February 26th, when surveillance footage captured her walking into a Holiday Inn Express in Northeast D.C. beside him, her small figure dwarfed by his, her braids swaying as she followed him down a hallway, her steps hesitant, her eyes betraying a quiet unease, her trust misplaced in a man who would betray her. Another video from March 1st showed her trailing Tatum into a room at a Days Inn, her small hand clutching a bag, her face a mask of trust in a man who would destroy her, her fate sealed in a moment no one noticed until it was too late, a moment that would haunt those who failed her, a moment that would echo through a city's conscience, a moment that would become a scar on a nation's soul. Workman dialed 671 SAFE, the city's child abuse hotline, his voice cracking as he reported Relisha missing, his heart pounding with the realization that a child had slipped through their hands, that the system had failed her at every turn, that the questions left unasked had cost a life. Police issued an Amber Alert on March 20th, but Tatum was already gone, a ghost slipping through the city's grasp, a predator who had planned his escape, leaving chaos and heartbreak in his wake. That same day, officers found his wife, Andrea Tatum, shot dead in a Red Roof Inn in Oxon Hill, Maryland, a bullet through her head, the crime scene cold and silent, a chilling clue to Tatum's unraveling, a sign of a man spiraling toward a deadly end, per NBC4 Washington, 2014. A warrant was issued for his arrest, but the trail was growing colder by the hour, the city's response too slow to catch him, too late to save her. On March 31st, searchers scoured Kenilworth Park and Aquatic Gardens, where Tatum had been seen after Relisha's last sighting, purchasing 42-gallon trash bags, a shovel in his possession, his actions painting a grim picture of a man disposing of evidence, covering his tracks, erasing a life, per the Washington Post, 2014. On April 1st, Tatum's body was found in a park shed, a self-inflicted gunshot wound, the same .45 caliber handgun believed to have killed his wife, per NBC4 Washington, 2014. The camera pans across Kenilworth Park, cadaver dogs sniffing through dense woods, dive teams dragging the murky Anacostia River, volunteers combing the underbrush, their faces etched with desperation, their hearts heavy with the fear of what they might find, trash bags and a shovel hinting at a horrific fate, but no trace of Relisha, no clothes, no hair, no sign of the girl who had been in Tatum's care, no evidence to confirm the worst fears or offer closure. "We cannot ignore the possibility that he killed her," D.C. Police Chief Kathy Lanier said in 2014, her voice heavy with heartbreak, her words a reluctant admission of a truth no one wanted to face, a truth that hung over the city like a storm cloud, a truth that left a family and a community grasping for answers, clinging to a hope that faded with each passing day. The screen lingers on an age-progressed photo from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, showing Relisha at 16, her eyes still soulful, her smile imagined, her face a haunting reminder of a child lost to a system that failed her at every turn, a child whose absence is a wound that refuses to heal, a question that lingers in the silence of a city that should have done more, a city that let her slip away. The scene shifts to a 2014 news conference outside D.C. City Hall, Mayor Muriel Bowser's voice steady but strained, her eyes betraying the weight of a city's failure, her words a plea for accountability in a system that had none. We as a city have said we don't want to lose another child. Yet Relisha's disappearance exposed a city that had already failed her, a system that had turned a blind eye to a child in its care, a community that had celebrated its compassion but overlooked its most vulnerable, a city whose power and resources never reached the margins, where Relisha lived, where children like her were left to navigate a world that didn't see them. How did Payne Elementary accept Dr. Tatum without a first name, a medical license, or a single document, despite protocols requiring verification of medical absences, despite a history of truancy that should have raised alarms, despite a file that noted Relisha's vulnerability? Per the Washington Post, 2015, why did it take 30 days of absences, 3 times the mandatory 10-day threshold for reporting to Child and Family Services, for the school to act, when Relisha's file already noted her mother's history of medical neglect and unstable living conditions, a red flag buried in a system that failed to connect the dots, that failed to ask the questions that could have saved her? Per the Charlie Project, why did Child and Family Services, aware of Shamika Young's struggles since 2010, including reports of missed medical appointments, unsafe environments, and concerns about her ability to care for her children, not intervene sooner, not follow up with a family living in a shelter known for its chaos and dysfunction, not act on the warning signs that were there for years, per NBC for Washington's Through the Cracks? 2024. Why did the D.C. General Shelter, run by a contractor paid $13 million annually, employ a convicted felon like Tatum and ignore his flagrant violations of no fraternization rules, allowing him to groom children in plain sight, to offer gifts and outings that went unquestioned by staff, to operate as a predator under the guise of kindness, to exploit the trust of a family and a community that had nowhere else to turn? Per the Washington Post, 2016, the camera cuts to Jamila Larson, head of the Homeless Children's Playtime Project, her voice breaking as she speaks to reporters in 2014. Given that so many agencies had eyes on this child, it is difficult to accept that this tragedy could not have been prevented. Her words a searing indictment of a system that failed to connect the dots, that failed to see Relisha's vulnerability, that failed to act when it mattered most, that let a child slip away in plain sight, that let a girl's life be erased by indifference. A 2014 city report claimed no justifiable government actions would have prevented Relisha's tragic disappearance, blaming Shamika Young's misinformation for the oversight, deflecting responsibility onto a mother struggling under the crushing weight of poverty and trauma, a mother who was herself a product of a broken system, per the Washington Post, 2014. But child welfare advocates like D.C. Councilmember Jim Graham called it a whitewash, pointing to a cascade of failures: poor communication between schools and social services, lax shelter oversight, inadequate training for staff, and a culture that normalized neglect for children like Relisha, children who were poor or black, and living on the margins of a city obsessed with its own power, children whose lives were deemed less urgent, less worthy of attention, less deserving of protection. Per the Washington Post, 2015. On X, a 2024 post by @Olas_Truth captured the lingering anger and grief. Relisha Rudd's case has been neglected due to racism. She was 8 when she went missing and would be 18 today. Why don't we talk about her more? Why don't we care? Her story, barely covered beyond DC's borders, became a searing indictment of America's indifference to poor black children. A girl whose poverty and race made her invisible even before she vanished. A child whose absence exposed the cracks in a system that claimed to care but failed to act. A system that failed to see her worth, her potential, her humanity. The camera flashes to protests outside DC General, signs reading, "Where's Relisha?" and "No more relishes." Communities' rage clashing with the system's silence. A city's power failing a child who lived in its shadow. A child who deserved better, who deserved to be seen, who deserved to be saved. The screen lingers on a vigil, candles flickering in the night. A child's drawing of a princess taped to a wall. Relisha's name whispered by those who loved her. A cry for a girl who should have been seen, who should have been saved, who should have been enough to make the system care. A cry that echoes in a city that still hasn't answered for a loss, a nation that still hasn't faced its failure. The camera zooms in on a senior law enforcement official, speaking off record to the Washington Post in 2016, his voice low, his words heavy with suspicion, his face shadowed by the weight of an unresolved case, his eyes haunted by the questions that linger. What's a grown man doing with a little girl in motels? The officials suspected Tatum was pimping Relisha, possibly killing his wife, Andrea, when she discovered his actions, a theory supported by the chilling surveillance footage of Relisha in hotel rooms, her small frame beside Tatum. A man with a violent past and a documented pattern of targeting young girls, his actions cloaked in kindness, but dripping with intent, his presence a betrayal of the trust placed in him. Per NBC4 Washington, 2014. Authorities believe Tatum likely killed Relisha before his suicide, given the 42-gallon trash bags, the shovel, and his time in Kenilworth Park after her last sighting on March 1st, 2014, per the Washington Post, 2014. The evidence is circumstantial but grim. Tatum's history of violence, his access to Relisha, the hotel videos, the murder of his wife, and his own death by suicide all point to a man unraveling under the weight of his crimes, a man who took a child's life and left no trace, a man whose actions left a family and a city grasping for answers. Yet her body was never found, no blood, no clothes, no DNA, no proof of her fate, leaving a void where answers should be, a silence that screams louder than any evidence could, a mystery that refuses to resolve. Some relatives hold onto a fragile hope. As parents, we can feel it inside. She's still with us. Stepfather Antonio Wheeler told the Washington Post in 2015, his voice clinging to a possibility that grows fainter with each passing year, a hope that defies the evidence but keeps Relisha's memory alive, a refusal to let go of a child who meant everything, a child whose laughter still echoes in their hearts. Others whisper darker theories. Human trafficking, though DC police dismissed it due to lack of evidence, citing no known trafficking patterns matching Relisha's case. Per the Charlie Project, a neighbor's claim that Shamika sold Relisha to Tatum for $500 surfaced in 2014, but was never substantiated, per WUSA 9, 2014, leaving only rumors and pain in its wake, a whisper of betrayal that hangs over the case like a shadow, a question that lingers without answer. Another theory suggests a family member hid Relisha, though no charges were filed against Shamika Young despite a grand jury investigation for obstruction of justice. Per the Charlie Project, the allegations swirling without resolution, the truth buried in a maze of speculation, a puzzle with pieces that don't fit, a story that refuses to end. Each theory is a wound, a child murdered, sold, hidden, or lost to a system that failed to protect her. Each possibility a fresh cut to a family and community already scarred, Each question a reminder of a girl who deserved better, who deserved a chance to grow up, to live, to be seen. I think about her every day. Her grandmother Melissa, Young said in 2025, her voice trembling, her eyes searching for a girl who never came home, her heart breaking with each moment of silence, each day without answers, each year without closure. Per Wusa 9. The camera lingers on an empty playground near DC General, swings creaking in the wind, a lime green ribbon tied to a fence, Relisha's favorite color, a symbol of a childhood stolen, of dreams extinguished, of answers that may never come, of a life that was here and then gone. The $50,000 FBI reward remains unclaimed, the case open. The Metropolitan Police Department still urging tips to 202-727-9099. But the trail is cold, the truth buried in a void where Relisha's laughter once rang, where her smile once lit up the world, where her presence once promised a future that was stolen. The screen cuts to a flyer, Relisha's face smiling, her stats listed like a ghost's resume. For feet 7 inches, 70 to 80 pounds, last seen March 1st, 2014. A description that feels like a plea, a reminder of a girl who was here, who was real, who was failed, who was loved, who was everything to those who knew her. Her absence is a question that haunts her family, her city, and a nation that failed to see her. A mystery that exposes the fragility of the systems meant to protect the most vulnerable, a story that refuses to let go, a wound that refuses to heal, a cry for a child whose light was extinguished too soon, a child whose absence demands we look closer, listen harder, care more. The camera returns to the DC General Shelter, now shuttered in 2018, its halls silent, its legacy a scar on the city's conscience, a monument to a failure that cost a child her life, a place that was meant to be a refuge, but became a trap, a graveyard of dreams for the children who lived there, a symbol of a system that failed its most vulnerable. A child's drawing, faded and crumpled, lies in the dust, a princess in a lime green dress, Relisha's favorite color, a sketch of a dream that never came true, a symbol of a childhood stolen by indifference, a reminder of a girl who was here and then gone, a girl whose laughter should have been enough to make someone notice. She didn't disappear into the night. She disappeared into our blind spots, ignored by a school that accepted a mother's lies without question, overlooked by social services that failed to follow up on a family's known struggles, forgotten by a shelter where rules were flouted and the predator roamed free, unseen by a city too busy with its power to notice a child in its margins, a child whose laughter should have been enough to make someone care, whose smile should have been enough to make someone act, whose life should have been enough to make someone see. Who failed Relisha? Her cheerleading coach Shannon Smith asked in 2014, her voice raw with grief, her question a dagger to the heart of a city that looked away, a challenge to a system that failed at every turn, a cry for a child who deserved better. I believe everybody failed that girl. The school, the system, the doctors, the police, and everybody else that should have had something to do with her. Per the Washington Post. The screen flashes to a montage, Relisha spelling her name in a Playtime Project video. Relisha. Her smile lighting up the frame. Her voice a melody that lingers in the heart, a sound that refuses to fade. A social worker's frantic call to 671 safe. Too late to make a difference. Police combing Kenilworth Park. Their faces grim, their search futile. A community holding vigils on Relisha Rudd Remembrance Day, July 11th. Their voices chanting her name, their candles flickering against the dark, their hearts heavy with the weight of a loss that lingers, a loss that refuses to fade, a loss that demands answers that may never come. Relisha Rudd should have been safe. She was surrounded by adults, teachers who saw her potential, caseworkers who knew her family struggles, shelter staff who saw her every day, a mother struggling under the crushing weight of poverty and trauma, a grandmother who loved her but couldn't save her, a city that claimed to care for its children but failed to act when it mattered most, a nation that prides itself on justice but let a child slip away. Yet no one saw her slipping away until it was too late, until the silence of her absence screamed louder than her laughter ever could, until her absence became a mirror reflecting our failures. "The system has to take responsibility," said Jonquilyn Hill, host of Through the Cracks, in 2024, her voice firm, her words a call to action, a demand for accountability, a plea for change that has yet to come. For each crack that they may fall through, why did so many of them fail in this one particular way that led to this little girl's disappearance? The camera pans across Washington, D.C.'s gleaming monuments, its halls of power, its streets bustling with purpose, then back to the empty shelter, its walls crumbling, its silence deafening, a stark contrast to a city that failed its most vulnerable, a city that let a child become a ghost, a city that turned away from a girl who deserved to be seen, to be heard, to be saved. Relisha's story is a mirror reflecting our failures, a cry for the other Relishes still out there, vulnerable, unseen, at risk of slipping through the same cracks, at risk of being forgotten in a world that moves on too quickly, that prioritizes power over people, that values visibility over the invisible. 11 years later, on this day, July 11th, 2025, at 9:36 p.m. Eastern European Summer Time, we're still asking, where is Relisha Rudd? How do we live with ourselves, knowing we lost a child who was right in front of us, a child we could have saved, a child whose absence is a wound that never heals? What does it say about us that we let a little girl vanish in plain sight, that we failed to see her, to hear her, to protect her? And what will we do to ensure it never happens again, to ensure that no child becomes a ghost in our blind spots, that no child is left to disappear in a city full of power, in a nation that claims to care, in a society that must do better, that must see the children in its shadows, that must act before another name becomes a question, a memory, a wound that never heals?